Hello there. This is going to be a quick one-take video to go over three things that I think the new ATEM Mini Extreme and ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, boy that's a mouthful, two or three things that they're actually missing. And so we're going to use this as a frame of reference. I want to actually start with something that you're all familiar with. So these guys did something very similar with an older piece of hardware that's $5,000–$6,000. And that's why the ATEM Mini Extreme is so amazing. We're going to be able to do something very similar to what these four guys did with streaming bridges and or with other inputs. So if you want to take in contributors from Zoom or Teams or Meet or all three, that's theoretically possible. But there are a few small gotchas, and I want to make sure that you know before you buy one of those devices. So here's the first one. When all four of those guys were on, three of them were using StreamBridge. They were all going into PhotoJoseph Studio, and then PhotoJoseph was sending an aux out, a return feed with what was actually going out onto Aaron's stream and to PhotoJoseph's, and presumably the others as well. Here's why that's important. You want whoever your guests are to be able to see that they're on stage. They need to know what's going on. Those guys are all pretty much professionals, even Tommy, who says he's not because he only does it as a hobby, but that guy has a serious hobby and habit. Here's what they did that I don't think will work with all of your guests if you're planning to use this for virtual events specifically. Many guests are not going to do well seeing themselves with a 1 to 2 second delay in the return. So if I wave and then I see myself wave later, that can be a little disconcerting. So that's one thing you really want to think about, and there are a few ways to get around this. And I'm going to go over those in a future video. If you guys like and comment and let me know that you're actually interested in knowing how to do that. It's a little more complex setup. Number two, and this one's actually kind of a big one. If we look at, let's go back. If we look at the ATEM Mini Constellation, it is the only ATEM switcher currently that has a Mixminus support built in. So it has the Mixminus so that you can give a custom blend of audio to each one of your returns. It also has enough auxes to actually send them a feed out. Even the Constellation doesn't have enough super sources to do some of the things that we might want to as far as giving lots of custom graphics to each of your returns, but there are ways to do that with those ATEM minis that you already have. So we'll talk about that in a future video. But now let's kind of key in on one other thing. Here's something that I've been doing for guests that I've been interviewing in my not so much spare time. I've been bringing in guests over Zoom, Skype, whatever their chosen method is, because most of them don't actually have ATEM Mini Pros, and I can't afford to send my pros and cameras out so that I can remote in people for a show that I'm not making any money off of, and the guests aren't making money either. So it would be a big ask. So instead, I bring them in to an ATEM Mini ISO, and I record there. I send them back just my video. And so that works in a one-on-one kind of scenario because it's just me being fed back to them, and their audio doesn't return because their mic is muted. And then in post, I go back and add that audio track back into the mix to do some final editing. The super source will make this much cleaner with the Extreme because you can actually do a lot of cool graphics and overlays and do pretty much a true live to tape cut or live stream. Again though, it does not handle the Mixminus. So that's another issue that you have to deal with. How are you going to return it? And once you're up to 4 people, if you are working on someone else's event, now do you need to send 4 different returns? And what information do you need to send if 3 of them are on stage and the 4th one's about to come on stage? You probably need a clock that you could use, say, an existing ATEM Mini Pro ISO, whichever one you have, to send the program out into their web cam source, whatever. You could send a webcam source return back to them in whichever app they're in with that feed, and then also a timer through a second second one of your inputs. So I think that's going to be a great way to get over some of the hump and let guests know what's going on. They could even listen in, which is always a good thing at the end, right before someone goes on stage. You really want them, if you're going straight in and out of guests, to be able to have a little bit of knowledge about what was just said so that they can kind of ease into it. So that's another problem to think about. And so then let's just kind of look at this. So this is the crux of it for me. What Photo Joseph didn't necessarily say, and what wasn't necessarily clear, when you watch him and Aaron work together, Aaron normally has in an AirPod, maybe two, and that's because in his Zoom session, since they're using these, streaming bridges, in those sessions, he is actually listening to him in real time, not on the same audio that he's speaking back and forth with him in the streaming bridge. He's using a Zoom chat with that AirPod. And so that's what Photo Joseph is actually hearing, even though he's monitoring inside of his ATEM Mini the audio levels coming through the streaming bridge. So that's a really different setup than what I think some people are thinking about for these new Extremes. And it worked really well in that 4-person streaming bridge demo that they did, because it was all streaming bridges coming in, which meant they could all share one Zoom link that was totally outside of what was streaming out. That gets really complicated if you think through this. When you have, say, one guest is on Zoom, another's on Skype, maybe one has to come in through something like Teams or Cisco WebEx, as much as none of us like it, simply because they are at an organization, a federal or some other agency, or they're at some banking institution, which will only allow them to use certain platforms. In those cases, you're going to have to swap audio around. And so that's really important. And something that wasn't used here, but something that you can clearly see, there's a Behringer mixer in there. And that Behringer mixer allows you to do something that in podcasting has been done for years. So in podcasting, what normally happens is they are going to have a Mixminus for each person who's speaking. So you hear everyone else's audio, you don't necessarily hear your own. And so when you look at Photo Joseph's setup with this nice Behringer, that's a great way to go. And it's something I'm considering, I'm not going to lie. But I'm also really realistic, and I have a device on hand from when I used to play around at my local hackerspace, and we were going to do a podcast ourselves. And so this actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 headphone mixes that you could send back into individual computers, Mac Minis, whatever you're going to use. And you just have to get it in and then back out, both to the ATEM and to the people who are guest, host, whatever. So it's a little bit to think through, but if you think about it like a podcast, you can handle the issues with audio fairly well. I think there's also some possibilities. I phoned a friend to make sure I was right on this. There's some possibilities to use Dante in that workflow. For those of you who are thinking about Dante and you're thinking, I'm going to skip the streaming bridge, most people aren't going to use the upper end gear. Know that we all want to go grab as many Mac Minis with the M1 chip as we can, but Dante does not yet work on the new Mac Mini. Let me say that again. Dante does not work yet on the new Mac Mini. Cannot stress that enough. So think through that when you're thinking through what these workflows may be short term and long term. There's some mini PCs that you could run things like Zoom on. I know I have an older one that I tested out a year and a half ago. Wouldn't run anything too aggressive. Skype would probably load it down, but there's some options. So with that, if you found this video useful, if you want to hear other things, or you want to see what I'm going to do next, because yes, I ordered the Extreme ISO, and then let's be serious, I didn't want to miss out, so I went back and ordered just the Extreme as well. So hopefully I get one of those really soon and I can start playing with it. And if you guys are interested, like this video, comment below if there are things that you would like to know about, and subscribe to the channel so that you'll know when the next video gets loaded. So with that, thanks and good luck.